Barking to all brigadiers out there that are listening to us, and welcome to another episode of the Bark Brigade podcast by Dogzilla Magazine. So, picture this. You're standing on the sidewalk, right?
Okay.
You have this, piece of premium, perfectly roasted chicken in your hand. And your dog absolutely loves chicken. I mean, they live for it. But then, 50 feet away, a squirrel twitches its tail.
Oh, yeah. We all know how this ends.
Right. Suddenly your dog acts like that chicken doesn't even exist, and you're being dragged into the street by this, furry missile. So why on earth does a rodent completely outcompete roasted poultry in your dog's brain? And, more importantly, how do you actually fix it?
Well, it really is the ultimate frustration for dog owners, isn't it? You feel like you're losing this negotiation to a wild animal, but the reality is you aren't actually fighting the squirrel. You're fighting your dog's biology and, their current understanding of how the world works.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are dismantling today. We are doing a comprehensive deep dive into an essential guide from Dogzilla written by Simon Tracy, and it's called Focus Dog Training. Train your dog to ignore distractions.
It's such a great resource.
It really is. And the mission of this deep dive is to equip you, yes, you listening right now, with the exact step-by-step methodology to get your dog to focus absolutely anywhere. We are talking about, transforming those chaotic walks into literal masterclasses in canine attention.
Which is critical because focus isn't just some cute party trick, It is the foundation of absolutely all other obedience.
Yeah.
Without focus, you don't even have a training session. You just have a dog who happens to be in the same zip code as you, completely ignoring everything you say.
Yeah, you just have a negotiation at that point.
Yeah.
So let's get into the foundation. The guide really frames this whole thing around the idea of elevating your dog's training to new heights by mastering focus. It doesn't treat distraction as this innate, unfixable flaw in your dog's personality, right?
Right, exactly.
It says we're utilizing proven techniques to conquer distractions and say goodbye to disobedience. And it's really about fundamentally strengthening the bond with your loyal companion.
What's fascinating here is the paradigm shift it demands from the handler right out of the gate. It immediately links the dog's attention span to the handler's strategy.
Wait, so it's our fault?
Well, kind of, yeah. When a dog isn't paying attention to you, it's not because they're being stubborn. Dogs aren't really capable of being stubborn in the human sense anyway. They are simply economists.
Economists, I like that.
Yeah, the environment is just currently presenting a more compelling payout than you are. So this guide frames focus as an active process.
Yeah.
It's an art that you, as the handler, have to carefully curate.
Okay, let's unpack this because the text gives us these 3 foundational steps to begin with focus training, and it's built entirely around this concept of building distractions slowly. So step 1 is starting with low-level distractions.
Yeah.
The guide suggests something like maybe a toy placed a few feet away or a person walking by at a really significant distance.
Right, but I think we need to define what low-level actually means in practice here. A low-level distraction is something the dog acknowledges but doesn't instantly react to.
Okay, so they see it, but they don't lose their mind.
Exactly. Like if you put a toy on the floor and your dog instantly lunges for it, that is not a low-level distraction. That's a total failure of the setup. You need to push that toy further away, maybe like all the way across the room until the dog can look at it, but still keep all 4 paws calmly on the floor.
And when they do that, when they actually maintain focus on you instead of that toy across the room, you reward them generously, right?
Absolutely, because you're basically establishing the math equation for focus. Ignoring the environment equals a massive positive outcome from the human.
Right. And then step 2 is where you gradually increase the challenge. So once they nail the low-level stuff, you have a friend, say, bounce a ball nearby, or you walk past with another dog. And then step 3 is setting your dog up for success.
Which is so crucial.
Yeah, if you see them struggling, you don't force it. You take a step back, simplify the distraction, and really celebrate those small victories. It kind of reminds me entirely of weightlifting.
Oh, how so?
Well, you don't walk into a gym on your very first day and try to bench press 300 pounds, right? You would get absolutely crushed. You start with just the bar.
That is the perfect analogy. Because cognitive load for a dog is exactly like physical resistance. If you overload the bar, the weightlifter's form breaks down. If you overload the environment with stimuli, well, the dog's focus breaks down.
Makes total sense.
Yeah. And if a dog fails, The weight of that distraction was simply too heavy for the mental muscles they've built up to that point.
But practically speaking, how do we manage that weight? Because, out in the real world, we don't control the squirrels or the sirens or the traffic, but the guide gives us some incredibly specific tips for managing the environment, starting with a geographic progression.
Yes, the locations matter so much.
Right. It says you start in a quiet room at home. Then you progress to the backyard. From the backyard, you move to a peaceful park. And only after mastering the peaceful park do you eventually move to busier areas, like a dog-friendly cafe or a bustling street.
You really have to respect that geographic progression just because of how a dog experiences sensory input. Like a quiet room at home is totally scent neutral to them. It smells like their bed, it smells like you. The acoustic profile of the room is completely predictable, so their brain is calm.
So all their mental bandwidth is just totally available for you.
Exactly. But the moment you step into the backyard, you introduce like thousands of invisible variables. There's the scent of a raccoon from 3 nights ago. The neighbor's dog barked 2 streets over. The wind is moving the leaves, creating these erratic visual patterns.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's sensory overload.
Completely.
Yeah.
And the park just multiplies those variables exponentially. And a dog-friendly cafe, I mean, that is the canine equivalent of standing in the middle of Times Square with flashing billboards while someone is literally shouting in your ear.
Which brings up a massive rule the text explicitly highlights, which is to focus on one distraction at a time. It heavily warns against combining multiple challenges. Like, for example, you never combine distance and duration simultaneously when introducing a new challenge.
That is a trap so many handlers fall into. Let's say you've taught your dog to sit and stay for kind of seconds in your kitchen.
Okay, pretty standard.
Right. But then you take them to the park for the first time. You cannot ask them to sit and stay for 30 seconds there. You are asking their brain to process a massive influx of new visual and olfactory data, the park itself, while simultaneously asking them to maintain a long-duration impulse control exercise. They will fail.
So you have to isolate the variable.
Exactly. If the environment is new, the duration requirement drops to like 2 seconds. You reward the immediate success.
But wait, let me push back on that slightly. If we're trying to build up their stamina, shouldn't we be pushing them? The guide's next tip is to keep training sessions short and engaging. It explicitly states that you want to leave your dog wanting more. Why not just train for an hour and really drill the park scenario until they're exhausted and have no choice but to focus?
Because you aren't trying to break their spirit, You're trying to build a positive association. If you train until the dog is exhausted or frustrated, the very last memory they have of that training session is negative. They remember the fatigue, they remember failing, they remember you getting annoyed.
Oh, right, so they dread the next session.
Precisely. But if you end the session after 5 minutes, right after they've achieved a massive success and they are still highly enthusiastic, that positive emotional state gets permanently attached to the concept of training itself. You want to end the game while it's still fun.
Leave them wanting more.
Yes, you're conditioning them to view training as this highly anticipated opportunity rather than, some grueling hour-long chore.
Okay, that makes sense. You want them to see the treat pouch and think, oh boy, we get to play the focus game, not, oh no, here comes the grind. And speaking of the treat pouch, the article dives deep into the economy of dog training, specifically with matching rewards to distraction levels.
Oh, this is where it gets really strategic.
Yeah, the text explains that in reward-based training, your reward literally has to outcompete the environment. It recommends reserving the special, high-value rewards, like small pieces of chicken, cheese, or freeze-dried liver, strictly for high-level distractions.
Because, again, it's an economic transaction. If the environment is offering a low-value distraction, say a leaf blowing across the sidewalk, a piece of standard dry kibble might be enough of a paycheck to buy the dog's attention.
Sure, kibble works for a leaf.
Right. But if the environment is offering a high-value distraction, like another dog barking aggressively, that kibble is suddenly worthless currency.
Yeah.
You cannot buy a dog's focus away from a massive biological trigger with a dry, boring biscuit. The reward has to dynamically scale to meet the difficulty of the task.
But what if food just isn't doing it? Like, the guide notes that you must vary the reward types. Food is great, but sometimes a game of tug, playtime, or just a really enthusiastic belly rub is actually worth way more than a treat. And if you're listening to this and thinking, my dog spits out chicken when they see a squirrel, how do you figure out what that ultimate currency is?
You really have to become a student of your own dog. Value is determined by the receiver, not the giver.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so if your dog is a highly prey-driven terrier, The opportunity to grab a tug toy, shake it violently, and fulfill that biological urge to bite and pull might satisfy them far, far more effectively than a piece of cheese. The handler has to experiment. You literally should make a list. Rank your dog's favorite things from 1 to 10. And number 10 is only ever brought out when you are facing a level 10 distraction.
So we've managed the environment, we've figured out our economy of rewards, but eventually you actually have to communicate with the dog. Like, how do we break their fixation when they're staring down that squirrel? The guide outlines a specific vocabulary for this, highlighting 3 essential cue commands: watch me, leave it, and let's go. So let's start with watch me. The guide describes this as the core skill that captures eye contact.
It really is the absolute 0 point of all obedience.
And the mechanics laid out in the article are very precise. You hold a treat near your eyes to encourage the dog to look at you. The moment they make eye contact, you mark the behavior with a clicker or a word like yes. You reward them, and then gradually you add the verbal cue, watch me, before presenting the treat. But what if the dog just stares at the treat in your hand and never actually looks at your eyes?
That's a super common hurdle.
Huh.
Handlers will hold a treat right on the bridge of their nose, and the dog just glares at the food. The trick here is movement. Yeah. You show the dog the treat in your hand, down by their nose. Then you slowly draw your hand up to your shoulder or your eye level. The dog's eyes will track the movement of your hand. For a split second, as their eyes come up, they will accidentally make eye contact with you.
And that's when you mark it.
The instant you get people-to-people contact, you say yes
Yeah.
and deliver the food, you're basically capturing that micro moment and paying them for it. Eventually they realize, oh, staring at the human's eyes makes the hand give me the food.
Which naturally leads us to the second cue, leave it. Now, I hear leave it, and I instantly think of yanking the leash or scolding the dog. But the guide explains a completely different mechanical approach. You place a treat on the floor and cover it with your hand as the dog approaches. When the dog finally realizes they can't get it and they back away or look at you, you mark the behavior. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, you reward them with a separate trait from your other hand.
That detail is the absolute secret to the entire behavior.
It's brilliant, because if you just uncovered the treat on the floor and let them eat it, you're just teaching them that leave it means wait patiently for the thing on the floor.
Exactly. And out in the real world, leave it usually applies to things you never want them to have, like a chicken bone on the sidewalk, a dead bird,
Wow.
a toxic plant. You can't say leave it and then say, okay, good job, go ahead and eat the chicken bone.
Right. So by rewarding from the other hand, you are totally rewiring how the dog views the concept of giving something up.
You're teaching this profound lesson. Abandoning something you want in the environment doesn't mean you lose out. It means you get something entirely different and usually much better directly from your human.
Wow.
It completely transforms leave it from a command of deprivation into a command of opportunity. The dog thinks, oh, if I ignore that boring kibble on the floor, magic chicken falls from the sky.
Okay, but let's troubleshoot this. You put your hand over the treat on the floor. A lot of dogs are just going to aggressively paw at your hand, scratch at it, or try to nose their way under it. What do? Do you correct them?
No, you do absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
You become a statue.
Yeah.
If you push them away, it becomes a game of wrestling. If you say, no, 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 you are giving them attention. You just keep your hand firmly over the treat and wait. A dog will eventually get frustrated or bored that their strategy just isn't working. The instant they pull their nose back even half an inch or sigh or look away, boom, mark and reward from the other hand. You are selecting for disengagement.
That brings us to the third cue in this arsenal. Let's go. The guide describes this as the tool for guiding your dog away from a distraction while moving. You are walking on a leash, you enthusiastically say, let's go, and you reward the dog for staying by your side and following your lead. How does this differ from leave it?
Well, if we look at the physics of it, leave it is generally a static command. The dog is stationary, observing something. Let's go, on the other hand, introduces kinetic energy.
Oh.
When a dog is staring at a cat across the street, they are frozen. Their body stiffens, their gaze narrows. A command like leave it asks them to stay frozen but look away, which is mentally very, very difficult. Let's go forces them to physically move their feet in a new direction.
So that physical momentum snaps the trance.
Exactly. You're using your forward motion to literally pull their brain out of that localized fixation. You don't yank the leash, though. You use an enthusiastic, high-pitched voice, tap your leg, and pivot. The dog just naturally follows that sudden burst of energy.
The guide groups all of these under distraction-proof dog training. It says this training enhances self-control and impulse control and establishes the owner as a trusted leader. But it also offers very specific training techniques for highly distracted dogs. For those dogs, it recommends using very short, clear commands like avoiding long, complex instructions that confuse them. It also recommends incorporating movement, like heeling or quick direction changes, to keep them engaged.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a highly distracted dog is often just a highly reactive dog. They respond to every single stimulus immediately without thinking. By using short commands, fast movements, and heavy impulse control exercises, you give them a structured job to do.
Like a focal point.
Yes, that job effectively drowns out the chaotic noise of the environment. We are giving them the cognitive tools to self-regulate, rather than just micromanaging their every paw placement.
Now, if we are talking about highly distracted dogs, the next section of the guide takes a pivot that I really want to dig into. It moves from basic obedience into fun dog tricks to enhanced training. It suggests gamifying focus by integrating advanced tricks like spin, touch, where they tap their nose to your hand, roll over, and bow.
This is a highly sophisticated training strategy, but it's cleverly disguised as play.
Well, let me play the skeptic here for a second. I'm looking at these fun dog tricks, spinning, bowing, and I have to be honest. If my dog is lunging at a German Shepherd across the street, asking them to do a cute little spin feels completely ridiculous. So what does this all mean? Are we just putting on a circus act, or do these tricks actually serve a purpose in a highly distracting environment?
It's a completely fair question, and it goes right back to that idea of cognitive bandwidth. These tricks serve as high-engagement redirection tools. Let's look at the biomechanics of the touch command, for example.
Okay, let's do it.
When you hold your hand out and ask your dog to touch their nose to your palm, you are forcing them to physically reorient their head, their neck, and their eyes away from the environment and directly toward your body. You are physically breaking their visual lock on the distraction.
So touch isn't just a cute high five, it's an override switch.
Yes. And tricks like spin or bow require a significant amount of cognitive processing and physical coordination for the dog. If your dog is mildly distracted by a squirrel on a fence, asking them for a standard sit might not require enough brain power to distract them. A dog can easily sit while still staring fixedly at a squirrel.
Oh, I've seen that. The rigid, shaking sit. They're sitting, but barely.
Exactly. Their body is sitting, but their brain is hunting. But if you ask them to spin, they have to disengage their eyes, coordinate all four legs, and track their own balance to perform the rotation. You're using the complexity of the trick to completely consume their cognitive bandwidth, leaving zero mental energy left to focus on the squirrel.
That is fascinating. You use their own brain power against the distraction, and the guide explains how to effectively teach these things using the Watch Me cue as the prime example of advanced trick training. It breaks it down into 3 meticulous steps. Step 1 is capturing the behavior. Step 2 is introducing the verbal cue only after the behavior is captured. And Step 3 is increasing duration and distance. It emphasizes that advanced tricks require breaking behaviors down into tiny, manageable steps using what it calls approximations. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, the concept of approximations is the absolute bedrock of advanced animal training. You never, ever reward the final perfect behavior on day 1. You reward the slightest movement in the right direction.
Right.
So if you're teaching a dog to roll over, you first reward them just for shifting their weight onto their hip. You do that 20 times. Then you reward them for lying flat on their side. You do that 20 times. You build the final behavior out of these micro successes.
So when applied to focus training, you don't expect a dog to stare into your eyes for a full minute at the park on the very first try.
Exactly. You reward a half-second glance, then a full second. Then you add a distraction and drop back to a half second. It's a constant sliding scale of criteria to ensure the dog is always succeeding, but always being slightly challenged.
But what happens when that all just falls apart? Because it does. The guide has a heading called Handling Overwhelming Distractions. It acknowledges that sometimes, despite all your approximations, your high-value chicken, and your perfectly timed clicks, a distraction is simply too much. If your dog becomes completely fixated on a squirrel in a park or is just struggling in a training facility, the guide says the absolute best solution is physical distance. You just calmly guide them away.
This is perhaps the most humbling yet necessary piece of advice in the entire text. Handlers let their ego get involved. They feel that if they retreat from the squirrel, the dog wins, or the squirrel wins.
Yeah, that whole I'm the alpha, I shouldn't have to walk away mentality.
Right, which is total nonsense. From a neurological standpoint, every dog has a threshold. If a dog goes over threshold, their nervous system is instantly flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. Their sympathetic nervous system takes over, fight or flight. When that happens, the cognitive thinking part of their brain is essentially offline. No amount of cheese, no amount of clicking, no amount of spinning is going to work.
It's like trying to have a deeply serious, nuanced conversation with a friend while standing in the front row of a loud rock concert. You can yell all you want, you can wave money in their face, but they literally cannot process what you're saying because the sensory input of the concert is too overwhelming. Sometimes you just have to step out into the hallway.
That is exactly what creating physical distance does. Walking away isn't a defeat. It is turning down the volume of the environment until the dog's cognitive brain can finally come back online. Once you're, say, 40 feet away and the dog shakes off and looks at you, then you can ask for a sit and reward it.
Moving into the precision tools of the guide, the text highlights the role of the clicker tool in focused dog training. We've mentioned the clicker, but the guide really explains the science of it here. It says the clicker provides a precise mark the instant the dog offers the right behavior, bridging the gap between the action and the delivery of the treat. But why is a piece of plastic that makes a noise better than just saying, "good boy"?
Because the clicker is a behavioral scalpel. When you use your voice to say "good boy," the tone changes depending on your mood. The volume changes, the length of the words changes. And crucially, it often takes a full second to say. A click is a sharp, identical, instantaneous acoustic marker.
It's binary. It sounds exactly the same every single time.
And that matters so much for timing. When a dog looks away from a squirrel and back to you, the window of that good choice might be a quarter of a second. If you start saying "good boy," by the time you finish the word, the dog might be looking back at the squirrel. So you just inadvertently rewarded them for looking at the squirrel. The click captures that exact quarter-second frame. It tells the dog the specific microscopic thing you did, the millisecond you heard that click, is what earned you the reward that I am now digging out of my pocket. It removes all ambiguity.
That makes a ton of sense.
Oh.
And the guide illustrates how this all comes together with this wonderful case study about a young Labrador retriever named Luna. Luna was struggling to focus on her owner during walks because she was intensely obsessed with squirrels and other dogs. So Luna's owner followed this exact roadmap. They started by teaching the watch me cue in a low distraction environment. Then they gradually introduced distractions. And here's the part I really love. They didn't go straight to real squirrels. They introduced toy squirrels first.
Oh, that's such a good step.
Right. They practiced the cue with a fake squirrel, then moved to various locations, and over time, Luna learned to redirect her attention even in the presence of real squirrels, achieving ultimate success on her walks.
That case study is just the perfect synthesis of everything the guide advocates. The use of a toy squirrel is a brilliant intermediate step that showcases the gradual build philosophy perfectly.
But let me address the listener's likely doubt here. If you're listening to this and thinking, my terrier would look at a stuffed squirrel, look at me like I'm an idiot, and go right back to hunting real ones because they don't smell right. How do we bridge that gap? Aren't dogs too smart for fake squirrels?
Oh, they absolutely know it's fake. A dog's nose processes the world in 3D. They know the stuffed toy isn't a breathing animal. But that's exactly the point. The fake squirrel isn't meant to trick the dog into thinking it's real.
It's not.
No, it's meant to mimic the visual profile of the distraction without providing the erratic, unpredictable kinetic movement and overwhelming scent of a real live prey animal. It provides a matter of challenge. It says, can you ignore the shape of the thing you hate, even when it's not moving? If they can't ignore a stuffed toy, they have a 0% chance of ignoring a live, zigzagging rodent. You basically manufacture controlled scenarios where the dog is challenged, but guaranteed to succeed if they try.
And to guarantee that success when you finally do transition to the real world, the guide brings us back for a deeper dive into reward matching. It explicitly uses the squirrel analogy here too. It says if your dog typically loves tennis balls but finds squirrels absolutely irresistible, trying to offer a tennis ball as a reward during a squirrel encounter will fail. You have to escalate to a higher value reward, like a squeaky toy or a piece of chicken.
Because context shifts value. A tennis ball might be the highest value item in the universe when you are in an empty, boring backyard. But when a live animal enters the visual field, the dog's primal prey drive engages. The reward you offer must appeal to a different, equally powerful drive, which is usually high-fat, high-protein food. If you bring a low-value paycheck to a high-stakes negotiation, you just lose.
Which is the perfect entry into the ultimate high-stakes scenario the guide covers. Advanced techniques for off-leash reliability, The text calls this the holy grail for dog owners, but emphasizes it requires a rock-solid foundation of focus and recall first. You don't just unclip the leash and hope for the best. You practice progressive recall in secure, fenced areas first. But it introduces a concept I find incredibly compelling, the emergency recall cue.
Ah, the emergency recall. This is something every dog owner needs to implement.
The guide says this is a unique whistle or a highly specific word that is associated only with the absolute highest value rewards and used strictly for critical situations. But the text sort of glosses over exactly how to train this. Walk us through the mechanics. How do we actually program an emergency recall?
First, you pick a sound the dog has never heard before. It shouldn't be come or hear. It should be something like the word jackpot or a specialized two-tone police whistle. You buy the highest value food imaginable, liverwurst, real steak, tripe, something they never ever get otherwise. You start in your living room, you blow the whistle or shout the word, and immediately, without them doing anything, you dump a huge handful of steak on the floor.
A literal jackpot.
A literal jackpot. You do this 10 times a day for a week. Sound equals an explosion of steak.
Right.
Then you move to the backyard. They are sniffing a bush. You blow the whistle. They will whip their head around because they know what that sound means. The second they run to you, jackpot.
But the guide stresses protecting the value of that cue. This raises an important question. How do we protect the value of that emergency cue out in the real world?
By treating it as sacred. You never, ever use the emergency recall to call your dog inside because it's raining, or to call them for a bath, or to call them away from another dog at the park just because it's time to go home. You use your standard recall word for that. The emergency cue is rehearsed maybe once a month to keep it fresh, and then shelved.
It's like breaking the glass in case of a fire. You don't break the glass just because you're bored. You break it to save a life.
Exactly. It must retain its overwhelming stopping power, so that if your dog slips out the front door and is running toward a busy road, that unique whistle triggers a highly conditioned, almost involuntary U-turn based on the promise of the ultimate reward.
That is such a powerful tool to have. Now, moving into the final section, the guide brings us to a concept that feels almost paradoxical. To master distractions out in the wild, you must first master the absolute absence of them. The section is titled, Creating a Distraction-Free Training Environment for Your Dog.
It is the blank canvas for all learning.
And the irony is just so obvious here, right? To deal with chaos, you start with zero chaos. The guide explicitly lists how to create the space. Choose a quiet room. Remove any toys or food bowls that might compete for attention. Ensure family members and other pets are completely out of the room. Use barriers or closed doors. To a human, this sounds almost excessively isolated. Like, do I really need to put the cat in the bathroom just to teach my dog to look at me?
Yes, you really do. It feels excessive to us because human brains are exceptional at filtering out background noise. We can read a book while the television is on and someone is cooking in the kitchen, but a dog's cognitive load, especially when learning a brand new behavioral concept, is incredibly fragile and easily maxed out.
It's like trying to teach someone calculus on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange versus in a quiet library.
Exactly. When you introduce a new concept, the environment must be completely sterile so that 100% of their brain power can process the new rule. If there is a squeaky toy in the corner of the room, 20% of their brain is monitoring that toy. If the cat walks by the doorway, 80% of their brain is tracking the cat. You now have 0% of your dog's attention to teach watch me. A sterile environment guarantees that you have the monopoly on their processing power. Once the behavior is learned in the sterile environment, then you can slowly introduce the cat.
And that brings us to the guide's final summary, which wraps up this entire journey beautifully. Mastering focus isn't just about buying a clicker, it's building slowly, matching rewards, using precise cues like watch me and leave it, incorporating tricks, and managing the environment. All of this leads to a harmonious relationship based on trust and mutual understanding.
And I think that concept of mutual understanding is where the real empathy of this methodology shines. We spend so much time as handlers thinking about how we can control our dogs, how we can override their instincts, how we can stop them from embarrassing us when they bark at a squirrel. But if you look closely at the mechanics of what this guide is really doing, it's providing structure.
Yeah, predictability.
Right.
Oh.
It's providing predictability to an animal trying to survive in a chaotic human world.
Huh.
Which leaves me with a final thought to ponder. We worry so much about restricting our dogs with rules, but does providing these clear, distraction-proof commands actually provide a massive sense of relief to the dog?
Wow, that's an interesting flip.
Think about the highly reactive dog. They feel the heavy burden of managing every single stimulus in the world. They think they have to bark at the mailman, chase a squirrel, and stare down the neighbor's dog. Does this level of focus training actually lower a dog's baseline anxiety? Because they no longer feel the burden of reacting to every single stimulus. By telling them, hey, your only job is to look at my eyes and I will handle the rest of the environment, we might actually be giving them the greatest gift of all, the permission to just relax.
That is a phenomenal perspective. We aren't restricting them with these cues. We are freeing them from the responsibility of managing the chaos. And that circles us right back to where we started. When you step out that front door into the real world with the sirens and the squirrels, the training landscape doesn't have to be muddy anymore. You don't have to be dragged down the sidewalk. With these precise tools, you can build a new kind of communication. One that works not just in the vacuum of a quiet living room, but right in the middle of a noisy, messy, unpredictable world. Thank you for listening, dear Brigadiers, and if you have any questions, visit the source article on Dogazilla magazine at dogazilla.com. That was all for this episode, and until the next time, bye to all listeners of the Bark Brigade podcast.